The unlikely story of a steel box that changed the world trading system. Ships now resemble floating warehouses, plying fixed routes between producing countries and consuming countries, while factories become ship-like, stealing away in the dead of night in search of cheaper labor. Does the anonymity of the box turn the sea of exploit and adventure into a lake of invisible drudgery? Does this box, the acme of order, efficiency, and global progress, create disorder and destruction and throw the world out of balance? Until recently, it was easy to believe that the world economy was running on automatic, regulating itself with an invisible hand. Now we know that the global trading system floats on a sea of credit, and that bankers can as comfortably bet on failure as they can on success. Cargo containers were an American invention of the mid-1950s, modeled on the automatic and continuous flow of oil into tank ships. The box became a fundamental physical unit of trade. In 2008, Rotterdam handled almost 11 million, the busiest port in Europe, but well behind those of Asia. The center of gravity of the maritime world has shifted east. The boxes made cargo anonymous, odorless, secretive, abstract. These elderly Rotterdammers came of age in a world of slings and pallets. The old warehouses are now either demolished and replaced by high-rises or converted into expensive waterfront lofts. The working port comes to resemble a child's game of blocks or a gangster's suitcase full of dollars. As the old harbors are abandoned to real estate speculators and tourists, the Rotterdam port pushes ever outward into the North Sea, sucking up the sandy seafloor and disgorging it into hectares of new land dedicated to the moving of boxes. Containers did not come to Rotterdam until 1966. They'd been accepted by dock workers on the North American West Coast a good 6 years earlier. A powerful but isolated left-wing union, born in the bloody confrontations of the 1930s, agreed reluctantly to give control over technological innovation to management. From that point on, management held the keys to job control. By the late 1970s, containers were the standard way of moving manufactured goods between the capitalist economies. In the outer terminals in Rotterdam, the physical human labor that remains has become a literal appendage to the machine. Starting in the late 1980s, Dutch terminal operators took container handling to a new level of automation. Some of the new land became intelligent. Robot vehicles are guided by transponders embedded in the pavement. We speak of labor-saving machines, and yet, what is really saved by automation? Automation does not guarantee freedom from drudgery. It merely raises drudgery to a higher power. The skilled workers who remain work in isolation, lonely aristocrats of labor.
Het is een hoop concentratie. Praten en breien is er eigenlijk bijna niet bij. Je zou eigenlijk moeten zorgen dat je eigenlijk rustig hier bezig bent in je eigen wereldje. geen moeilijkheden thuis hebben, want dan word je helemaal gek hier zo. Om simpel eenvoudige reden, je hebt je continu concentreren. Ik kijk nu vanaf 30 meter naar beneden door een beetje vuile ruiten heen. En ik moet toch proberen om die containers op een bepaalde tijd er weer uit te krijgen. En dat gaat niet helemaal, want ik heb wat problemen met mijn spreader, zie ik. Normaal gesproken is dit werk ook eigenlijk precies goed voor 4 uur. En dan los je collega af onder de kraan en die gaat dan de tweede taak, zeg maar. Die gaat dan de tweede helft van de dag gaat hij hierboven zitten takelen. Gewoon de simpele reden je concentratievermogen gewoon steeds vermindert.
Between 1950 and 2010, global shipping tonnage has increased at a rate nearly 3 times that of world population growth. More and more stuff travels the high seas. The crew knows nothing of the cargo, but for refrigerated goods which must be checked daily. Frozen cod returns to the familiar waters of the North Atlantic after a detour to China for low-wage filleting. Second-hand container cranes pass on the horizon, destined to unload American military cargo in the Middle East. The first engineer compares the ship to a powerful and voracious bear, guzzling 5,000 gallons of bunker fuel per day. Bunker oil is sulfurous, tar-like in its viscosity, the cheapest and dirtiest available, the very dregs of the refinery, leaving a smoky yellow smear on the horizon and turning the ocean acidic. Pause in mid-ocean for repairs. Sometimes even a new ship breaks down. Endless monitoring, checking, looking for signs of trouble. The war against rust, washing, chipping, painting, washing, chipping, painting. The crisis deepens. Ships are again laid up by the hundreds, manned by skeleton crews, or sent to the scrapyards of Bangladesh before their time. 10% of the world fleet is idle. Shipyards are again in trouble as orders for new ships dry up. Riding high in the water, this ship carries only empties, with nowhere to go. From centuries of river trading, the Chinese have learned to create floating archipelagos of ships and barges. The ship is not an isolated thing, but a unit in a makeshift ensemble. Behind it all is backbreaking toil and dock workers' casual physical feats. The link between the ship and dock and city streets is seen in the street porters of the Hong Kong of the 1960s, photographed by Ed van der Elsken. The physical definition of work, moving a mass over a distance. What is the training for work in the Hong Kong of the 21st century, when industry has fled across the border to China proper? The sea is a great instrument for testing, for trials and tribulations.
The container itself has made it possible to ship increased volumes and access these markets. It has helped consumers being able to purchase things that they would not have been able to buy beforehand, because the ability to be able to ship these goods has made it possible to produce large volumes, and the production of these huge volumes has brought down the prices.
What we basically have done with containerization is allowed Asia to begin production of the goods that were made locally. And as the people gained wealth, they themselves became more affluent, and then they themselves started wanting cars and everything else, like the Americans done. So a lot of the production is being shifted.
I love Hong Kong! Yes! Beautiful! Yeah. Yes, beautiful!
Ocean shipping was the first industry to be globalized in a deliberate effort to pay the lowest possible wages. This was because of yet another post-war maritime invention of the Americans, the flag of convenience, which allows ships owned in the rich countries to register in poor countries like Liberia and Panama. This legal loophole makes it possible to hire cheaper foreign crews and avoid safety rules and regulations. Taken together, the flag of convenience and the container take us back to a world of relentless toil, interrupted only briefly.
China never had a maritime world. It's always been a continental society, a continental culture, interested primarily in what's going on inland. The sea was always a small, peripheral activity of no fundamental importance. And it's only recently that has changed. It does depend now on the maritime world, on maritime trade, on trade with elsewhere, in a way that it never did in the past. And that has changed and is changing how people perceive the sea, but slowly.
A necessary condition is that the capitalist must have high profit. And for that to happen, you need to keep the labor costs low, you need to keep the environmental costs low, you also need to have favorable relationships between state and the capital. And as far as the labor cost is concerned, and historically, capitalism has managed to accomplish this through slavery, through serfdom, but of course that cannot be maintained forever. And when the workers got organized over time, and they would be able to push up the wages and also push up social spendings. But all of this would be bad for capitalism, because that would mean higher labor costs, higher taxes over time. So when that happens, what do capitalism do? The capitalists will then relocate the capital to areas where the wage is lower.
The synergy of logistics, transportation, the container, and the very large pool of people who readily are prepared to change their lives dramatically by migrating to areas where they have no family, no friends, and to be prepared to work for 12, 14, 15 hours without complaining, and only with the only idea in mind to make a better tomorrow for themselves and for their families or children, has made it possible to develop China the way that it has.
60% of China's exports to the United States are produced by American-owned multinational companies. This factory is Chinese-owned.
我说我准备跳舞啊，跳舞吗？哎呀，我跳不来。那时候我跟你说，那时候你知道我会跳什么舞吗？那时候我读书时也不怎么肥，刚才照片你也看到了啊。对吗？照片就是不怎么肥嘛，所以说我跳舞跳不来。就是刚才你还在唱，你现在怎么不唱了？那么多人打篮球哎。哪个？你看吧，下面好多人打篮球。哦，下面还好哎，蛮多人玩的，每天晚上。是吧？那些应该是我们的熟人，等一下有没有机会下去啊？就看包包了吗？只有看包包。走。他等下又不让拍。谢谢啊。
Where will these young women be in 20 years? Will they return to villages that have finally been developed? Or will the Chinese industrial economy continue to rely upon the cheap labor of 100 million young migrants from poor villages?
颜色是吧？但是我要有那个下面有铁的那个。这种又不能。
要找什么样薄的，稍微厚一点的？
薄一点的，夏天哦，因为是夏天。
比较就是说比较看起来比较有胸型一点的，
是吧？
对，
集中一点的那种。
你把你的这些都是薄一点的，你可以挑几个款式试一下，他们是不是跟你一起的？
Now, one question we can raise now is that in the future, eventually, of course, the Chinese workers will not be content with sweatshop working conditions forever. And one day they will also demand 8-hour working day, they will demand higher wages, they will demand more political, economic, social rights. So the Chinese labor in 10 years' time, maybe 15 years' time, will no longer be cheap. And that will have serious implications for the viability of global capitalism in the future. One possible implication when in the future the Chinese workers start to have better organizations, start to have more bargaining power, is that it will change the global balance of power between labor and capital again to the favor of labor, and therefore pave the way for another upsurge of global working class struggle.
喜欢的太多了，我买不了那么多。